Hey everyone, it's Sauce and I am back with the final installment of my backpacking gear review series. This one is a bit of a catch-all. In this one I'm going to be going over my toiletries, my first aid kit, my gear repair kit, and some of the gear that I bring on some of my trips but not all of my trips. Think things like lots of snow or lots of sun or grizzly bear country. If this is the first video you're seeing, be sure to check out my backpacking gear review playlist to see my full setup. And be sure to stick around to the end for one of my favorite pieces of backpacking gear that I feel like people don't really talk about. So without further ado, let's talk about the things that keep me mostly clean while backpacking, and by clean I basically just mean keep me from catching any sort of diseases. And that is my toiletries. First up is my mini bamboo brush, and this has been on pretty much every hike with me since the PCT, which is pretty incredible. I prefer this to a comb because I just find brushes to be easier for my hair. I just think it works a little bit better when my hair is a little bit wet. And this thing is super lightweight and obviously super durable because it's been with me for so long. I end up recommending this to a lot of people. It's also super affordable. It's like 1.3 ounces and I think like $6 on Amazon. So I've actually recommended this specifically to a lot of guys who end up growing out their hair on through hikes and then don't know how to brush it. But yeah, definitely love this thing. Helps keep me sane on long stretches. Next is my toothbrush, and instead of cutting my toothbrush, I got this silly little UL one. I was buying a few other things from Lightsmith and I was like, why not just try it out? And I do like it because it is super light. It's 0.1 ounces, which is just ridiculous. I would imagine that's even lighter than if you cut a full length toothbrush in half because of the way that the handle is constructed. I do like this better than the little thumbprint ones because I feel like with those you have to like stick your hand in your mouth when you're brushing your teeth. This one you can kind of get back there without having to put your hand in there too, which I appreciate. And I also like this little cover that came with it to kind of protect it from the other things in my first aid kit and keep it nice and separate from everything. Basically though, any like travel toothbrush is gonna work pretty good for a backpacking toothbrush. You don't have to get too fancy with it. Same thing goes for toothpaste. I basically just use whatever travel toothpaste I can find in the travel section at the grocery store, whatever I have laying around my house. I don't have a strong brand preference or anything, and I've never used like the little tablets or anything like that, so I can't vouch for those, but this works perfectly fine for me. And they're super easy to find in like all sorts of grocery stores. Hand sanitizer is another very crucial element for keeping myself clean on trail. And I basically usually just go for these little like 1 ounce sizes that you can find at like the dollar store, at the grocery store, in the checkout line. I do really like the kind that come with these little holders because I like to fasten it to the outside of my backpack for easy access. So anytime throughout the day that I feel like I need to use a little bit of hand sanitizer, I don't have to go digging for it or anything like that, which is really handy. And then I honestly just refill these whenever I see a larger hand sanitizer somewhere in town. I don't have to keep buying them and they're super easy to refill. You just unscrew the top, put it in there, you're good to go. Another item sort of in that category is my trowel. You of course always want to use the hand sanitizer after you've been using the trowel. I also keep this attached to the outside of my pack just for easy access. I will tuck it like into the straps here so it doesn't move around and make a bunch of noise, but I have overall been really liking this Epax trowel. I used to have a Deuce of Spades and it was like a little bit longer and a little bit thinner, and basically what ended up happening is it just bent and then started to like break, so the metal got really sharp, and didn't love having that hanging off the back of my pack or having to use it when I was digging holes. So this one's a little bit thicker, so it feels a little bit sturdier, but it's still super light. And so I've really been appreciating that, and it's worked great for me so far. Next in the bathroom category is baby wipes. I take these on pretty much every trip. Personally, I have not become comfortable enough with the backcountry bidet method to use it myself. So in the meantime, until I graduate to that next level of badass backpacker, I will be using baby wipes. I like them too because they're sort of multi-use. I can use them to wipe my face at the end of the night, which can feel really nice on a long stretch, or wipe down my legs, keep my feet clean, whatever it is. If I have enough, I can use them for other purposes. And then of course, whenever I go to the bathroom, I feel like I'm actually getting a little bit more clean than if I'm just using toilet paper. Usually I try to split a pack with someone in town, or if I'm just going on like a weekend backpacking trip from home, I'll split a pack and save the rest because you don't need to carry like all 50 that it comes with, and that's usually the smallest that I can find. I don't have a brand preference or anything, but I do like to try and find the ones with the little plastic closures, just because I think that that's easy to store, keep in your pack. You don't have to worry about it drying out or anything. You know, you can get that closed nice and easily. Sometimes when I split them up, I do put the other half in like a Ziploc baggie, and that works fine too. Another item in the backpacking category specific to people with uteruses is these OB organic tampons. I really like using these just because they don't have an applicator, so that's just less trash that you have to pack out with you from the backcountry. Personally, I've tried a cup before and it didn't really work for me, so when it comes to dealing with a period on trail, I always just recommend use what works best for you at home, because that's what's gonna work best for you in the backcountry. Just don't forget to pack everything out, and again, that's why I like these so much. They're super small and not a lot of trash that comes with them. If you'd like for me to do a longer video about how I deal with my period while backpacking, definitely leave me a comment and I will do my best to get to that. Next up is sun and bug protection. For sunscreen, I usually just use whatever 3-ounce little plastic container that I can find. This is actually a 1-ounce one, but all my 3-ounce ones seem to have disappeared. I like that it's not huge, but it's still a good amount of sunscreen to keep with you. It will definitely cover you for like a week, and they're usually pretty easy to find in like the travel section or in the sunscreen section at the grocery store. I also always make sure it's at least SPF 30, and I prefer the kind that come in like the smaller plasticky like bendable tubes rather than the hard tubes or like the spray containers, just because those are so bulky and I feel like they're a little bit heavier. I do sometimes also get these 1-ounce containers. Sometimes the like long skinny ones by Banana Boat are really nice too, because they fit really well in my fanny pack, and I know myself, I know I'm not gonna stop as much as I should to maybe get out my full thing of sunscreen and reapply. So if I have it in my fanny pack, I can just pull out that little 1-ounce amount and reapply it to at least my face and my neck while I'm walking. For bug spray, I have really tried to move away from DEET, not only because it's really bad for you and bad for your health, but also because it really does melt through stuff. I've had DEET melt through its own container and then melt onto my gear, which is just a giant pain in the butt. I've also had it like explode in resupply packages. It's just, in my opinion, really not worth dealing with. I'd rather use something that's a little bit safer and just as effective, and I have found that to be true with the Sawyer picaridin. I think it works a lot better than like the natural alternatives like the eucalyptus stuff and things like that. I don't find that those do anything really to the mosquitoes in July in the high country. And so I have really enjoyed using the picaridin. One note with this is that compared to DEET, I do think you have to apply a little bit more, and you have to like make sure it actually covers the whole area. Like for example, with DEET, if I sprayed like one spray on my ankle or something, I would find that the mosquitoes would kind of tend to avoid that whole area, whereas picaridin, it's like they're just not gonna land exactly where you put it. You do have to like spread it around when you spray it on yourself, and maybe reapply it a little bit more often than I did with DEET, but I definitely prefer that to having DEET all over my body in the middle of July in the backcountry when I can't wash it off for like 7 days. Next up, we are talking first aid. I've pared down my first aid kit quite a bit over the years as I've gotten more comfortable with my skills in the backcountry and realized that I don't need 30 different sizes of Band-Aids for every single possible scenario. The way I see it is I should have what it takes to get me by safely, get me into town if I need to, but I don't need to have something for every single worst case scenario. Most likely, if it comes to that, I'm gonna be needing external help anyway, so the most important thing is just being able to get to town as quickly as possible. Basically, I wanna pack a little bit for a wide range of possible scenarios. Everyone is different though, and it really comes down to personal preference, your skill set, and what you're comfortable with, and also a lot of times how remote you're going to be in the backcountry. So definitely take whatever you think is appropriate for you. This is just what works for me. So with that preface out of the way, here is what my backpacking first aid kit looks like. First, the absolute staple to my backpacking first aid kit is gauze pads and Leukotape. Having these two sort of makes you able to create any type of Band-Aid you could possibly want, and it's really good for being able to put something on blisters and like weird spots where Band-Aids might typically rub off. It's also versatile enough that if you did happen to get a bigger wound, you definitely have plenty of supply to be able to cover a larger space. Two things about the Leukotape is that you want to be very careful with it because it is very strong. What makes it so great for backpackers, it's really strong adhesive, is also what can come to bite you in the butt. You want to be careful, especially if you're using it on something like blisters, that the tape itself is not covering or touching any of that weakened skin, because when you go to take it off, it could end up pulling off the skin with it, which puts you in a way worse position than you were with just the blister. That being said as well, you might want to wait a few days before you try and take Lugo-Tape off because it is so strong. You want to wait for it to weaken a little bit. So I would say once you get this on, feel like you're committed to it, and be careful with where you put it. Another thing to know about Lugo-Tape is it can be a little bit hard to carry and store while backpacking because if it gets smashed, sometimes the adhesive sort of oozes out of it. And also a lot of times it comes in a bigger, bulkier roll. So one important solve that I found for that is Lightsmith sells these little Lugo-Tape rolls, which is like half a yard. It's a lot smaller than the big rolls they typically come in, which makes them a lot easier to store. I have found that when I rewrap the Lugo-Tape myself, the adhesive just doesn't stay as strong. So you can do that, but I've found that buying them pre-rolled like this is a lot easier. You can also store Lugo-Tape in a hard-sided container to help prevent that smashing in your backpack. Make sure that the adhesive doesn't come out over like a longer period of time. I know I just talked about using Lugo-Tape and gauze pads for basically replacement band-aids, but I do also carry just a few band-aids, like 2 to 3 max, just to have for convenience sake if I get a cut in a place that isn't like on my feet or something, it's easy to just slap a band-aid on it and keep going real quick. One note about band-aids is I do like to get the kind that have adhesive on all sides, so not the ones with just like the little gauze all the way to the edge, because I find dirt can get into things really easily that way. If I can find it, I also like to carry mini antibiotic ointments. It's nice just for like a little bit of peace of mind. If you do get a deeper cut or something, you can stick that on there before you put it in a band-aid. Another thing in addition to the mini antibiotic ointments is these little alcohol wipes. These are great for your gear repair kit too, but it's nice to be able to clean an area if you fall and get a scrape before you start to bandage it up. No backpacking first aid kit is complete without a mysterious bag of pills. I am not a medical professional, so please check with your doctor before you take anything, even over the counter, but these are the pills that I typically take with me in my backpacking first aid kit. A side note, I personally prefer to avoid gel pills because I feel like they don't do as well with elements, especially heat. They can kind of stick together and I'm not sure what all ends up happening to them, so I try to stick to like the hard or powder pills. First up is something that most thru hikers would consider an essential, and that is ibuprofen. I do want to take this moment to say, please do not take ibuprofen every single day or for every single ache and pain that you have. It is so bad for your organs and it just can be really detrimental to use in excess over time. It's okay if you're having like an acute injury and you just need something to get you by to town, but I think it is something that is definitely abused in the thru hiking community. So that's my little soapbox. Try not to take so much ibuprofen, but it is nice to have in case of certain situations. Something that I've been doing in order to try and take less ibuprofen is I've been carrying turmeric with me as well. It's supposed to help with inflammation, and so I try and take that instead of ibuprofen if I'm feeling like my feet are really swollen at the end of the day, or just keep it as a baseline to keep that inflammation from happening in the first place. I also typically bring a few capsules of Benadryl with me in case I or someone else has an allergic reaction, and it's also a nice multi-use pill. If you are having trouble falling asleep, it can also potentially be used as a sleep aid. I also always carry 1 to 2 aspirin, again, in case of an emergency. If someone is, having heart troubles in the backcountry, I feel like it's one small thing that you can bring with you just in case. It's also, of course, can be used for fever and headaches. The last pill that I always include in my pill lineup is Imodium. So far, I have been blessed by the backpacking gods and never really needed to use it for myself, but I have definitely given it out to others who have not been so fortunate. For those of you that don't know, Imodium is an anti-diarrheal, so it can really come in handy if someone is dealing with giardia or maybe like food poisoning a few days out of town. It's great to help you just kind of stop the flow and be able to get yourself into town so you can get rehydrated and hopefully get over whatever it is that's causing that diarrhea. The final and most essential piece of my first aid and hygiene kit, this kind of falls under both, is my Aquaphor. I love it so much, and I mostly use it as chapstick, but can also be used if like you have a dry patch of skin, and I've heard of people even using it to prevent chafing. It's time to talk about gear repair and gear backup. There is some overlap between this and the first aid category, which is why I decided to group them together. Like Lugo-Tape can be used both for blisters and to repair your tent if it gets a hole in it. And I would use my mini Swiss Army knife scissors in both scenarios. These are some of the extra things that I carry specifically for gear repair. First is the mini Swiss Army knife that again I have had since the PCT. I like to hang on to things. If they're not broken, don't fix them. And these little scissors, as you can see probably, they like almost stick together because of how much they've been used to cut open tape. They probably need a good soak, but this is a super handy little tool and it's super light. And it also does have a little knife in case you need that for anything. I use this to cut cheese sometimes. It also has a mini pair of tweezers, which can come in handy, although they're not the best tweezers. Definitely not as nice as like regular tweezers, but they could work in a pinch, pun intended. So in addition to the Lucro tape, I do like to carry a few strips of tenacious tape just because it is gear specific and it's nice to just have a few patches of this in case I need it for like my puffy or had my down sleeping bag rip before, and this was a great little repair patch to have on hand. You can also cut these up if you need to cover a smaller hole. I like having these little patches because I just think they're easy to use and I just throw 2 or 3 in my gear repair kit and I'm ready to go. If you do end up having a hole, you just want to clean the area with alcohol wipes or whatever you can get to kind of get all that dirt off as much as you can, and put the gear repair tape on. And if possible, you want to let that sit overnight so that the adhesive can really set. So try and repair when you're at camp or something, so you're not like using and pulling on the gear all day. Next, I also carry a blow-up pad repair kit now that I carry a blow-up pad. I know that Thermarest specifically sells some online for their blow-up pads, but I also have the one that came with my blow-up pad. Usually they include a alcohol wipe, a little glue dot, and then a patch that goes over the glue dot to like fully field repair the hole in your sleeping pad. Luckily, I haven't had to use one of these yet, but I have helped friends repair holes in their sleeping pads before, so it's definitely something handy to have with you so you don't end up sleeping on the ground for several nights. Next is something I talked about a bit in my kitchen video, but I also kind of consider this part of my gear repair / gear backup, and that is the Sawyer plunger and the Sawyer coupler. As I mentioned in that kitchen video, the coupler is really handy and super light and super small, which I feel like it's a no-brainer to carry just because it's just so tiny and light. The thing about this is you have to kind of have a hose situation to be able to use it to backflush. So that's why I also do recommend the plunger. Honestly, I don't typically carry a plunger, but I try to find one every time I'm in town to make sure that I'm backflushing my filter as often as possible to keep it in good shape. Something else I carry for the Sawyer in my first aid / gear repair kit is a backup O-ring. If you're not familiar, this basically goes in between the filter and where it screws onto your water bottle to help prevent the dirty water from basically spilling out. If you do lose this, it can kind of be a decently big problem. I've heard of people, seen people have lost them myself. And so one way that I mitigate that is pack an extra O-ring because they're super light, super easy. I've definitely given these out to people before as well. And another thing that I've seen people do is actually super glue their O-ring into their Sawyer so they don't have to worry about it potentially falling out. And another quick tip about that is if you still have the original cap that came on top of your Sawyer squeeze, there is an extra O-ring in that section as well. So if you did lose your O-ring, be sure to check the top attachment because there might be an extra one in there. On the theme of water filtration, I also always bring aqua tabs with me. Aqua tabs, if you don't know, are water purification tablets. So there's a few scenarios I can think of where aqua tabs might be helpful or necessary. Say you accidentally lose your filter somehow, maybe you drop it while you're trying to collect water and it rushes away down a stream. If you accidentally leave your filter out and it freezes overnight, or if you're just feeling plain old lazy and you've had a really long day and you just don't feel like filtering another liter of water. I really appreciate having the aqua tabs sometimes for that reason, just so I can stick 2 into a liter, let it sit for 30 minutes and I'm good to go. They do add a tiny bit of a chlorine-y taste, but I don't find that it's very strong. I also like to use the aqua tabs as backup in situations where I have to filter particularly nasty water. I just don't want to take any chances. I have been to places where I have seen cows actively pooping and walking through the water that I'm filling my water bottle up with. And so even if I'm still filtering it, I sometimes treat it with aqua tabs as well, just for peace of mind and to feel better about the fact that I'm drinking that water. I also bring a tiny sewing kit with me on my backpacking trips in my gear repair kit. And a nice thing to add to that is like a little safety pin. It can be handy just to fix little things in the moment. I found this tiny one, I think at a hotel. I linked a kit from Amazon, but there's like 20 in there, so maybe split it with some friends. Yeah, just something super lightweight. A needle and thread should be plenty as far as a backcountry sewing kit. Finally, now that I know how to use the map and compass, I try to bring that on every single trip that I take now. I'll admit that I didn't always used to do this, and I feel like that was a bit silly and a bit reckless. I do think it's important for everyone to learn how to read a map and compass and to bring them with you. You never know what can happen to your phone. It could die. You have your maps on download somehow. I just think it's great to have that as a backup. Finally, there is gear that I carry in backpacking trips that is super helpful in certain situations, but just not necessary to carry all of the time. And I am dubbing that my sometimes gear, and I didn't really know where to put it, so it's getting included in this video. The first two items are things that I've definitely talked about before in regards to snow, and the first of those is microspikes. These are just super handy when the snow is really packed and there's a lot of ice on the ground or whatever. They've saved me a lot of falls on my butt and a lot of time in order to not have to take tiny little baby steps in order to avoid slipping in the snow. I used to have these really cheap Amazon ones that have worked great for me for years, but I can't find the link anymore. So I'll try and link something close, and then also these Catullas, which I have also used and can vouch for. They're just a little bit more expensive. Also in the ice and snow category is my Camp Corset ice axe. This is definitely more of a self-arrest kind of ice axe, not a mountaineering kind of ice axe. I think is why it's so popular with through hikers. I specifically picked this up on the PCT for the Sierra in a high snow year, and it has served me well. I have self-rested with it before and it did what it was supposed to do, thank God. I do have tape around the top. I heard from people that thus made it easier to grip, and also when it was cold, it helped mitigate the cold from the metal on your hand. I have a leash on here as well, as you can see, which is a controversial addition. I definitely recommend doing your own research on that and deciding if you want to use a leash or not. It probably needs to be fixed. I think it might have gotten cut short or something. But yeah, this is my ice axe that I take with me anytime I'm gonna be traversing steep snow. Definitely do your research before leaving on trips and find out if it's a kind of condition where you might need an ice axe. Next is bear spray, which I do carry with me anytime I am in grizzly country. I specifically like the kind that comes with a little holster. I attach it to my fanny pack so it's super accessible right at my hip, and I'll be able to pull it out quickly if I were to encounter a bear. I do see people sometimes carrying bear spray, but they have it in like their mesh pocket in their backpack, and honestly, you're not gonna be able to access that quick enough if you were to encounter a bear. So just make sure if you are carrying bear spray, it's at least somewhere where you can access it easily. Another quick side note about bear spray, I will link a study in the description of this video about how it's a lot more effective than guns. I only say this to try and help people who aren't sure if they may need to carry a firearm in grizzly country. There have been studies, and bear spray is much more effective and ultimately going to be better for both you and the bear. I believe it's a federal crime to hurt or kill a grizzly bear, so if you do end up shooting one, you better make sure that you have really good proof that it was in self-defense. So overall, I would rather not even mess with that and just have bear spray. Something else that I carry on colder trips is this sleeping bag liner, especially when my old down sleeping bag was getting a little bit older and probably lost some of its down and some of its warmth. This was super helpful, especially in high altitude areas. At the beginning of the season or at the very end of the season, it's nice to just have a little bit of extra warmth in your sleeping bag. It can also be great to help keep the dirt in your body off of the inside of your down bag. You can just pull this out and wash it rather than having to worry about washing your down sleeping bag. On the opposite end of super cold and snowy adventures are very sunny adventures in the desert. Something that I really like to bring with me on those is sun gloves. I bought these on the PCT, and I also used them this year in the Grand Canyon, and I was really happy to have them. Your hands are one of the places that people forget about a lot and get burnt really easily because they're exposed all day and you just don't think about it. So it's great to have some extra sun protection on your hands. And this particular model has like active ice, and so when I get these wet, or even when I'm just putting them on, they keep my hands really cool actually, which is a nice extra touch in hot places like the desert. Continuing in the hot desert sun gear category, and as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, there is a piece of gear that I feel like is totally underutilized in the backpacking community, and that is a sun umbrella. I am obsessed with my sun umbrella. I've used it on many different trips, and I swear it feels 10 to 15 degrees cooler under that thing. It's also a game changer when you're in places that have no shade, like for example, the Great Divide Basin on the CDT, it's like 80 miles between trees. So it's nice to have just something to keep your body out of the sun. Well folks, that is all. I believe this is the most comprehensive backpacking gear review I have ever done. So please leave any questions that you have for me in the comments and be sure to check out the full playlist for all of my thoughts on all of my gear. I hope you found this helpful and thank you so much for watching. Bye.